It really wasn't that long ago that Florida was America's ultimate political battleground. I mean, this was the state where presidential elections were literally won or lost by a few hundred votes. But today, it's something else entirely. So, how did the nation's biggest swing state become a fortress for one-party rule? Okay, let's get into it. Just look at this contrast. In 2000, the whole world was watching Florida. The presidency came down to 537 votes. It was the definition of a toss-up. Now, fast forward to today, and what the sources are showing us is a totally different picture. We're talking about a single party with a supermajority running what some are calling a laboratory for a whole new way to govern, one that's heavily influenced by powerful corporate interests. And that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. Did this just happen? Was it just a natural shift in how people vote? Or was this a deliberate, systematic project to re-engineer the entire political machine of a state? Well, according to the sources, it's very much the latter. To really get how this happened, you have to start by following the money. The sources all point to this incredibly powerful relationship between some of the state's biggest industries. We're talking real estate developers, massive utility companies, insurers, and the government in Tallahassee. It's a system where corporate power and political power are basically fused together. So here's how that loop actually works. It's pretty straightforward, really. Corporate money, a lot of it dark money, gets funneled into campaigns to help elect friendly politicians. Then, once they're in office, those same politicians turn around and pass laws that are a huge help to their corporate backers. Think deregulation for developers or massive rate hikes for utility companies. It's this cycle of influence that has become the engine of Florida politics. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this case study makes that abstract idea totally concrete. This was the famous ghost candidate scandal. You had consultants tied to Florida Power and Light, the state's biggest utility, allegedly funneling money to prop up a spoiler third-party candidate. This ghost candidate didn't even campaign, but they managed to pull away over 6,000 votes. The result? The utility-backed Republican won a crucial state Senate seat by just 32 votes. And the payoff? Well, not long after, state regulators gave the green light for a record-breaking rate hike for that utility. It's a perfect example of how a tiny, targeted political investment can lead to a massive financial return. Okay, so winning a few key elections is one thing. But to really lock in power for the long haul, you've got to rewrite the rules of the whole game. And that's the next phase of this model. Completely re-engineering the legal and constitutional foundation of the state itself. One of the main weapons for this is a legal tool called preemption. Basically, it's the state government in Tallahassee telling local cities and counties, nope, you're not allowed to make your own laws about that. And while preemption is a normal legal concept, the sources show it's being used in Florida super aggressively to push a single statewide agenda, an agenda that almost always benefits big corporations over the desires of local communities.
And you can see how this has ramped up over time. In 2011, it was used to threaten local officials with personal fines if they dared to pass gun safety laws. By 2021, they were using it to retroactively cancel a vote that had already happened in Key West, where residents voted to limit cruise ship traffic, a massive win for the tourism industry. And for over 15 years, a supposedly temporary state ban has stopped local towns from regulating plastic bags, a huge victory for the retail and grocery lobbies. The bottom line here is that preemption has become the go-to tool for corporate interests to just completely bypass local democracy.
But maybe the single most powerful tool for rewriting the rules is redistricting, how you draw the election maps. Back in 2010, Florida voters actually passed constitutional amendments called fair districts to stop this kind of partisan map drawing. But by 2022, that whole system was about to be blown up. So take a look at this. This was the old Congressional District 5 in Florida. It was what's known as a black access district, and it was drawn specifically to make sure that the large black community in North Florida had a real opportunity to elect a representative of their choice, which is protected by both the Voting Rights Act and the state constitution. And this is the new map pushed through by the governor's office. District 5 is just gone. Its voters were literally cracked apart and sprinkled across 4 new districts, all of which were designed to lean Republican. The immediate result was that an entire community's voting power was just completely diluted overnight. And the impact was absolutely staggering. After these new maps were put in place, Republicans won 71% of Florida's congressional seats. I mean, let that sink in for a second. 71% of the seats in a state that is basically a 50-50 state in presidential elections. This just shows you how redrawing the maps can create election outcomes that are totally disconnected from how the state's population actually votes. Of course, new laws and new maps don't mean much if the courts won't uphold them. And the sources describe a state Supreme Court that has been completely remade by new justices appointed by the governor. This new court has been systematically rolling back decades of legal precedent on everything from abortion rights to the death penalty, and it consistently sides with the legislature and the governor, even on really controversial moves, like suspending prosecutors who were elected by their local communities. So with the rules rewritten and the courts on board, the next logical step was to create new enforcement bodies, especially when it comes to the act of voting itself. So in 2022, Florida created the Office of Election Crimes and Security, basically a dedicated election police force. And its first big splash was a series of very public, very high-profile arrests of formerly incarcerated citizens. Now, many of these folks were Black, and they had actually been issued voter cards by the state and thought they could vote. Most of the cases ended up falling apart in court, but the political message was loud and clear. For some people, the simple act of voting now comes with the risk of being arrested. At the exact same time, the state brought back the Florida State Guard, which hadn't existed since 1947. Now, the key thing to see here is the chain of command. The National Guard answers to the governor, sure, but it can also be federalized by the president. This new Florida State Guard cannot. It answers only to the governor. This creates what the sources are describing as essentially a private paramilitary force that is totally immune to federal control. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. You have to understand that this whole system, the laws, the enforcement, the corporate partnerships, it isn't meant to just stay in Florida. The sources are very clear on this. The Florida model is designed to be a blueprint, a template for other states to copy and paste. And this is where you can really see the coordination in action. Look at these policies: banning diversity programs in colleges, restricting certain types of investments, new regulations on gender-affirming care. You see almost identical laws, sometimes with very similar bill numbers, just popping up in Florida, Texas, Tennessee. This is no accident. It is a coordinated national project. So, at the end of the day, we're left with this question. Florida has gone from a competitive, two-party swing state to a consolidated system where corporate and political power have kind of merged into one, creating this durable, one-party supermajority. The sources are calling it the Florida model, a system built by and for powerful developers and other corporate interests. The real question for the rest of the country is this just a one-off experiment, or is this the blueprint for a new way of doing American governance?